Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. This week, we're going to cover a couple of important stories from Kentucky's breaking political news. And then we are very excited to hear from Cherokee Elder Janet Quigg and Mike VanWinkle. They're both members, I believe, of the Cherokee tribe. Janet's the founder of the Richmond powwow. And we're going to be talking about Kentucky's Native communities and how this low-profile perspective is kind of organizing to change that, and some of the amazing work that they're doing to support their community. So should stick around and hear from Janet and Mike. We'll then close out with a call to action. It will sound a little bit familiar if you were watching last week's show. But before we jump into it, are you ready to help turn Kentucky purple? Because we know our state is deeply red. We have a GOP supermajority that remains committed to moving us backwards on LGBTQ rights, weakening the ability of unions to collectively organize for better pay and better working conditions. And with critically important elections coming to voters across our state in November, we have a critical opportunity to turn this Commonwealth around and make sure that we send the message we want a Commonwealth that works for all of us. So join Progress Kentucky, support our campaign to turn our Commonwealth purple. Make a donation at our secure Act Blue website and help spread the word that we're tired of the GOP ignoring the needs of regular folks and that we think our Commonwealth is worth fighting for. So let's check in with our co-hosts. Let us know who you are, where you are, what's your protest sign say today. And of course, we want to know what you're protesting today and put your protest sign in the chat. We can put it on the screen if you are, of course, watching the live stream on YouTube. Maybe we'll read it out loud. And that way the people who listen to the podcast can know what you're talking about. But I'm Aaron. I'm coming to you from Childsburg, which it seems like if the city council has its way in Lexington, it will not be the furthest community out next to the growth boundary, because it looks like they're trying to increase the growth boundary, perhaps. So at any rate, my protest sign to this. I'm going to steal this from the internet. I think Trump is showing Bed Bath and Beyond a reasonable doubt. So the pictures of the files. We don't talk about national politics much, but that image really just stuck with me. All right, let's check in with Doug. Doug, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm coming to you from Harrison County, Kentucky, one of the prettiest counties in Kentucky, I seem to think. I had 2 or 3 signs, and I finally went with this one. I always try to type it out so I can remember it. But positivity wins over negativity. So let's be positive, and let's shut down the negative.
Nice. I like it. Thank you, Doug. All right, and our third co-host this evening, the lovely and talented Kimberly Cecil Jones. Kimberly, you are muted.
Oh, it wouldn't be a great show unless I was muted, right? How's everybody doing?
Fantastic. So excited to see you.
I know, right? I'm still here on the JOB, but just wanted to drop by here and let you know that I'm coming to you live from Louisville, Kentucky at Macy's. This is my office behind me. So my protest sign says today, I didn't have one made up. I'm going to use one of Doug's that he didn't use today.
Okay, which one? Oh, you're gonna make Doug answer for you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He said he had 3.
He said he had 3.
Here it is.
Look at that.
Here it is. Join us. Help us make change.
Nice.
See, actually, he made that one for me.
Oh, yeah.
I just didn't get a chance to get it from him.
Well organized ahead of time, clearly. All right. So we're going to go to news of the week, because every week in Kentucky, there's some new political stories we have got to share with you. And this first one comes to you from Doug. Doug, what you got?
Yes. The KKK made a visit to our state this week. But were they from Kentucky or North Carolina? The flyers identify a group from North Carolina, but based on news reports, I believe this may be the work of a local, as the Mount Sterling Police Department has arrested someone. Along with Mount Sterling, reportedly flyers were also handed out in Paris, maybe a week or so earlier. The flyer mentioned a neighborhood watch. It said not to worry because the Klan is awake. Hey, the Klan is woke? How about that? That's something, that's earth-shattering news. On June 7th, there were a couple of people brandishing KKK cards at a pride event in Corbin. Words were exchanged and the KKKers assaulted one of the people attending the event. That resulted in a hate crime charge. The distribution of flyers in Mount Sterling is being met with littering charges, not a hate crime, but apparently littering is what could actually be charged. The second flyer mentioned end all kinds of CRT, bring back God in schools, 2 gender-only policies, and some other stuff that I really don't care to repeat. Basically words of hate. I did a little research. The Southern Policy Law Center, based in Alabama, notes there were 22 hate groups in North Carolina in 2022. And one of the groups that is identified on the flyer as the Loyal White Knights of the Ku Klux Klan was active in North Carolina. Continuing the same trajectory as years past, the number of active Ku Klux Klan hate groups again declined in 2022. However, the subsequent news coverage they received helped maintain the false perception that the Klan is a dominant white supremacist group in America. KKK activity will likely remain stagnant or continue to decline in 2023. Unfortunately, contemporary white supremacy movements will continue to eclipse the Klan in terms of recruitment, propaganda, events, and overall success. The Southern Poverty, the SPLC, noted that in 2015, KKK had locations in Kentucky, but now there are none in 2022. They also stated in 2022, 2 of the hate groups operating in Kentucky that are not the Klan are the Proud Boys and the Tea Party of Kentucky. The Tea Party of Kentucky is categorized as a hate group in Kentucky. I want to end this with several Facebook posts that were made on media outlet Facebook pages over the last couple of days. I read about the flyers. It sickens me to think that we have neighbors who are so bigoted and dangerous. I'm ashamed of these Kentuckians. The vigilante attack on our nation's capital has emboldened these disgusting actions. My town was one of the ones that got the flyers, and it honestly scares me to death. Scares me for my children, scares me for my children's friends of color, scares me for the people of color here that I don't even know. It was only a matter of time. Hate groups used to live in the shadows, but for the last few years, with everything that our country fights about, they have been given the green light to surface. Certain very high political leaders, not local, have given credence and a big thumbs up the last few years to them, so they truly believe that they no longer have to hide. The last one I will read is from Charles Booker. Hate does not define the people of Kentucky. All across the Commonwealth, there are kind people who show love, uplift humanity, and resist hate. Racism is very real, but so too is resilient love determined to uproot that hate. I know the challenges are real, but I'll always speak up for the beautiful Kentucky I know and love. We deserve a brighter future, and we won't let hate win. I could not find any public statements about this issue by the Beshear or Cameron campaigns. I checked tweets and news reports, and I didn't find anything. But Kernels of Truth needed to talk about this issue. The KKK is an awful organization, but personally, I'm more concerned by those people who blindly follow Trump, including Daniel Cameron and many other Republican politicians. A quick reminder, you must vote in this upcoming election. Back to you, Aaron. You have any thoughts?
Oh, always. Yeah, I do think it's incredibly telling that the KKK flyers were distributed, in places they thought they could find support. Right? They didn't do it in downtown, Louisville or the west end of Louisville. They did it in Paris. They did it in, I think, also Winchester. I heard reports that they were in Winchester as well, Lawrenceburg. And I'm glad that it seemed like the response was universal, that these were just trash, and but it felt like it took a minute for the police to get their act together and say anything useful about it. But I don't know. It's just, folks who've been in the shadows are emboldened, right? I don't know. We had a very an energized conversation last week about racism and about who's propagating it. But yeah, I know that this is something that we're confronted with it. We can't look away. We've got to deal with it. We've got to address it. We shouldn't give power to the KKK, right? But like the fact that they're taking it on their own, we need to push back against it as just rigorously as possible. I don't know, Kimberly, what have you got to say about this one?
So many things that I could say is like, they don't always use flyers, right? And there's a lot of white supremacists here in Louisville, Kentucky, as well as Lexington, and all over this state. This is one of the most racist states in America. And would I be scared? No, because there's more that goes on with white supremacy other than a brochure. I believe a few years ago that happened in New Orleans or somewhere in Louisiana. They were getting these letters and brochures, things of this nature. But some of us, we live it every day. Every day. We live it on our jobs. We live it in certain organizations. We live this almost every day. Because when you're talking about the Ku Klux Klan, I guess, like their leader, Donald Trump said, there's very good people on each side. No, it is not. And it never has been. Now they've traded in their hoods and burning crosses for tiki torches and khakis and a polo shirt. So you don't know who's who, what's what, but they do feel empowered, very, very much empowered, since their leader was so boisterous and obnoxious in his display of discrimination towards those that were disabled, those of color. And let us not forget how he talked about Haiti and Africa. They were bleep whole countries. And I wish I had the opportunity to tell him that Africa is one of the most richest richest countries in the world, although they live at a poverty level that we as Americans can't even attest to. But robbing and stealing from other countries of color, robbing and stealing from the citizens of this country is still white supremacy. And as far as I know, they might as well just put the hood back on, because it doesn't matter anymore. We know who you are. We know who you are. We know where you are. And guess what? We don't care. We just don't care anymore. And I noticed, Doug, that you said something about, is the KKK woke? Oh, heck no. They could never be woke. But I tell you what, this Black woman right here is too woke for the okie doke. Back to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Kimberly, for your views on that story. I also wanted to point out there's a kind of, I think, a highly related story that I just threw in the chat there. The Department of Justice actually kind of reached a consent decree with Madison County schools because their kids, black kids, kids of color, were being taunted with the Confederate flag. There was race, just kids were confronted with racism, and the way the school responded was wholly inadequate. And so the Department of Justice actually had to get involved, which now has inspired CBS News to cover the story. But just so it goes to show, like those Klan flyers don't just come from nowhere, and the idea that they were brought in from out of state is a little outrageous, right? So we've got a homegrown racist for sure. But at any rate, I just wanted to point out that I think those two stories are very much related, as well as the Pride event that a guy with a gun and a KKK card felt compelled to stop at. These folks are emboldened, and we have got to push back on it wherever we possibly can. And if Dan Cameron is unwilling to call it out, then maybe Kimberly's comments fit. As the top cop.
You know what else though, Aaron? You know what else? Bringing that up about the Confederate flag. I know, our viewers and listeners know that that represents the antebellum South before the Civil War. Okay, that in itself is symbolic of the hideous, tragic, traumatizing past of those that were brought here against their will. But guess what? There's something else to that. Now, a lot of people are feeling like the American flag. When I see the American flag, I see them going up the Capitol, crawling on the walls and everything, carrying American flags like they were little roaches going up the wall. So we have to collectively do something to get people back on the same page of really, truly loving our country again. And if you're not loving your country as much as you can, then you don't have big voter turnout. So let me just say this to our listeners and our viewers that I love America. I've been a lot of places, and I still would choose America.
Good. Yeah. Good. Yeah. And I think I've said this before. I think the American flag is absolutely worth fighting for. It doesn't stand for, January 6th, but yeah, look at the images. They had Trump flags, they had Confederate flags, they had Nazi flags, but what flag did they have the most of in that crowd? It was the American flag. And so, patriotism should not reflect just some harsh racist view of what, taking America back to when it was great, which of course America wasn't great for a whole hell of a lot of people when they were, when they're what they're aiming for, right? It's a white supremacy thing for sure, but I don't know. We have another story I wanted to get to, but Doug, any thoughts you wanted to get at?
Yeah, I want to jump in on a couple of things. I thought maybe somebody might ask, where were the KKK locations in Kentucky in 2015? One of them I knew about in Dawson Springs, Kentucky. That's in Hopkins County. That's the county where I grew up. They had a big compound close or outside of Dawson Springs, Andy Bashir's hometown, called the Imperial Clans of the American Knights of the KKK. And apparently there was a separate group there called the Loyal White Knights of the KKK. In Georgetown, there was a part of the Trinity White Knights of the KKK. And then in Frankfort, there was a group called the Original Knight Riders Knights of the KKK. But apparently all of those are no more, or they've gone underground, or they're not being recognized. And I do want to make another comment about the flyer that was found, as Aaron mentioned, in Winchester, also Paris and Mount Sterling. It said, "Neighborhood watch. You can sleep sound tonight. The Klan is awake." And I was riffing on that, saying that they were woke. If you're
We
awake,
didn't really think they were woke.
oh, I didn't really think they were woke, but
I knew that.
I was riffing off of that. So just wanted to make that clarification.
All right.
Dougie Fresh, I don't think anybody thought that you thought that they were woke. Okay? I don't think anybody.
So Sandy likes to point out there is a problem. No one agrees with what the country really is. So if you're claiming that you're supporting our country, you're a patriotic supporter of our country. What's the country? Well, I think the Constitution's a pretty good representation of what our country stands for. So I'm all in for, the Bill of Rights. I think those are like all great things we should all be supporting, and the fact that we. I don't know. I will riff on this later, but I do, because we have amazing guests I want to get to and a story I want to get through. Let's move on. But yeah, I did want to just point out that the LGBTQ plus piece was, I think front and center in that KKK flyer. Obviously, that's very much related to it. I'm not saying that Senator Max Wise is a member of the KKK, the guy who led the charge to get SB 150 passed. Of course, SB 150 is the omnibus, horrible, don't say gay, anti-trans bathroom, anti-trans healthcare, just horrible piece of legislation. But I will say this about Max Wise. I don't know that his last name is highly appropriate because the Kentucky Education Cabinet looked at SB 150. Their lawyers, their policy experts actually read the bill line by line. And it turns out that conjunction junction, what's your function? They did not do a very good job of actually crafting the bill. They delineated a whole set of things that they wanted to outlaw. But they used, instead of an and, they used an or. So this is a story that comes to us. The Courier Journal's got a good write-up. Olivia Krauth, who's just a fantastic reporter, just pointing out that, that or really changes what the law means. And that's what the lawyers say. That's what, policy experts say. And it lets, schools choose, right? So you can either prohibit all mention of gender identity and sexual orientation across all grades, or wait to discuss human sexuality until 6th grade. Those are the kind of the options that the bill delineates, unintentionally, I'm sure. And I'm sure that they'll try to fix it in the next session, but I do think it's just a very clear indication that those folks are not ready for prime time with their anti-LGBTQ hate. And a nice little celebration during Pride Month is that the opposition, although powerful, not necessarily that competent. So any thoughts about that one?
There's an old saying, haste makes waste. And what they did to SB 150 right at the very last minute in an effort to get everything passed and passed in both chambers and get it to the governor. So they knew the governor was going to veto it. So they had to get it to him during the period of time in which the legislature would be able to override the veto, which they did. And as I said, haste makes waste. And they do that all the time. They'll pass a bill in one session and somebody will mess up, or somebody will, I don't know, get in somebody's pocket, whatever. And they'll come back and they'll change the law. And that's what they'll try to do with this bill.
Hopefully, though, by the time they come back to try to change it, it'll be thrown out because of a court case, right? ACLU is also suing over this bill. I think there's others who would like to sue over it as well. But yeah, it's a mess. And just a reminder that we still have a lot of work to do here. Kimberly, anything you want to add?
I would just like to add this, that years ago, there was a preacher that came to Louisville from Texas. And one of the things that he said to me, and I talked with him numerous of times once I had met him. And he told me, he said, here in Kentucky, people hide behind their religion. And I didn't really quite understand it years and years and years ago, but I think I understand it now. And what that totally means is to be mean and spiteful and to hurt and do harm. They say this is what the Bible says. I think that they have read it completely wrong. Um, Now I do understand. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? What I'm saying, that these folks, they hide behind religion. They say in the name of Christ, we are doing this when Christ hasn't told them to do anything. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot in the Bible, and a lot of it. I think isn't there a school district that's banning the Bible because they opened up the opportunity to ban books, and they're like, oh well, we clearly got to get rid of this one because it's full of murder and full of horrible behavior, and yeah, so yeah, the Bible is a thick tome with a lot of conflicting guidance. So cherry picking is how a lot of these kind of more conservative evangelical folks, I think, find a cover for their hatred, right? But it does seem like Jesus was pretty clear on most of that stuff. Like, like if you look at the things that he said, it didn't seem like he was encouraging us to hate anyone, right? So
No, so that's why they hide. And another thing that I know, and you guys can move on, but another thing that I notice is that lots of times, I'm going to say lots of times, these particular individuals are dealing with conflicting or so-called sexual identification themselves. Um, I think people um, that are just lacking the compassion and the care for another human being is really sent by hell. That's just how I think about it.
all right, compassion. That's what we need more of in this Commonwealth. I will say I completely concur on the compassion front, and let's now move on to our guests. Very excited to have a couple of guests joining us for this episode, and we've got Elder Janet Quigg and Mike VanWinkle, who I believe are both members of the Cherokee Nation, and they're going to join us to talk a bit about the Richmond powwow and kind of Native community concerns here in Kentucky. So, Mike and Janet, good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Good evening.
Doing great. Yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. So I guess let's start with what is the Richmond powwow? So Janet, I understand you are a founder of the powwow. What is it? When is it? And as a non-native member, am I welcome to come?
Absolutely. The powwow is a celebration of Native American culture. Basically, it began in 1994 as a culture fest in the international office at EKU from a professor named Neil Wright. I happen to be an alumni of EKU as well, and that's where it started. Now we are on our 29th year. So I think we're doing something right. Maybe I have learned just a little bit since then.
Well, you're an elder, so clearly that there's some wisdom, I think, recognized in that. So almost your 30th year, so that's really exciting. What does it consist of, and what should folks kind of expect when they show up?
A powwow is dancing. Native Americans are dancing. We have a drum group that comes and they play the drum. The dancing is in a circle because everything that Native Americans do is in a circle. Basically, we'll have Native American food and Native American crafts to sell.
And singing.
And singing, sorry, and singing. Anyway, Friday is school day, And we're the only powwow in Kentucky that still has a school day. And we send out school day letters of invitation to schools all over Kentucky, trying to get them to come so we can educate them on beadwork, tomahawk throwing, teepee crafts, putting up a teepee or whatever. There's so many things that they can learn from. Last year we had Cherokee marbles, and that was a first. So it's just a learning experience for children and adults as well. And basically our statement is we try to educate the public and especially the children about Native American culture. And if we do that, then we keep this culture alive.
Awesome. And when is it?
September the 22nd through the 24th.
Awesome. And it's in Richmond Battlefield Park there?
Yes.
Well, that's fantastic. And I'm just going to be perfectly honest because we are the Kernels of Truth. So we don't like to lie on this show. I'd like to acknowledge I was not really aware of it. But I'm really glad that I've heard about it and glad that we can share the news of the event with our listeners. And we've got enough time so folks can make their travel arrangements. They can make their plans, hold the weekend, and come check it out. So tell me, I'm not a Kentucky native. I've been here for, a handful of years. But I haven't heard a lot about the Native community in Kentucky. I don't think I've seen, reservations on the map or anything. What how would you characterize the Native community in Kentucky? What tribes are active and I guess where are you at now?
There are a lot of tribes in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of population of Native Americans. We're not full bloods by any means, but we have the ancestry, and we're just hundreds of us all over. And I don't know, it's Cherokee, Shawnee, Wyandotte, Chickasaw, Miami, and maybe Seminole at one time.
Yeah,
I don't
Seminole's
know.
up here as well.
There's a lot of it. Go ahead.
But the bigger thing is when you sent me the email earlier, you mentioned a book, and some of the lies that were actually told about Kentucky being the happy hunting ground. Native Americans have been here for almost 200,000 years. Think about that for a second. We have actually locations here in Madison County where there's Native burial mounds. Okay, we've had archaeologists go down there and inspect them. They're saying 150 to 200,000 years. But yeah, mind blow. But here's the biggest question that I had. These people built mounds that were 40 foot wide at their base, 60 feet high. But there wasn't any indigenous population for the state of Kentucky. You don't build that kind of structure with a basket for a war party member.
Yeah,
it has to be somebody of very high standing in the tribe.
Right.
And I've even had conversations. It's kind of funny when I call Frankfurt. One of the conversations that I had was actually kind of a funny thing. I asked the lady. I said, "Well, how long do you have to be in Kentucky before you're considered indigenous to the place?" Well, it doesn't work that way. I said, "Well, is it 25 years, 50 years, 100 years? What's the right number?" She said, "Well, you have to be here, for a long time." I said, "Well, what about if you were here before there was a Kentucky, like say the outpost of Berea in the Commonwealth of Virginia? If my people were here then, would I be indigenous then?" "Well, sure." I said, "Well, come on down to Berea. I'd like to take you to my fourth great grandmother's grave. Her name was Hester Littleflower VanWinkle. And her children are buried. Their children are buried. Their children are buried. My grandfather's buried. And my stepmom is buried all in the same plot. So I've got 300 years worth of history in the state of Kentucky. So if there's anybody that's indigenous, I guess it would be the VanWinkles because we were the people that settled Berea."
Well, yeah, that's a very good point, Mike. And I think the burial mounds makes an important point as well. Obviously, this is not something you do on a hunt on a hunting party. You don't build that
Right. You don't build huge structures. I mean, and if you go, and I'm sure like Doug lives over in Harrison County, I can't think of a field that's ever been turned over in Harrison County that you don't find an arrowhead in. Now that's probably straight. And you can do the same thing in Jefferson County and just about any other county in the state of Kentucky. We're not talking about one or two at a time. We're talking about if the field has been turned, you can literally go out there and find a dozen or more in just a single field. Well, what does that tell you? There were a lot of indigenous people here. We always have been here. Okay. And I think that's the biggest thing. And one of the things is Janet is one of the creators of the powwow. I'm more the political advocate arm. I deal in the political realm a lot more than she does because I look at the injustices of what is happening to my fellow Native Americans. Okay. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you are in the Commonwealth of Kentucky, with the exception of Native American, you have a box to check. You know what Janet and I have to check? Other.
Huh. That's it.
Yeah,
Well, that may be biracial, but other than that, we get other.
Yeah, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
So
how would you characterize the kind of state of Kentucky and its kind of what it does to recognize Native
it doesn't
communities?
at all. And the bigger sad part about that is, this isn't just a Kentucky problem. Okay. These lies were told all the way from the Trail of Tears. Okay. That, the Native Americans, they didn't really live here in Kentucky, but if you look at Ohio, they celebrate the Miami Indians. You go to Tennessee, you can't throw a rock without hitting a sign that says something Native American. So there was a swath between Ohio and Tennessee. No natives lived in ever.
It's where all the dragons were, and the dragons ate the Native Americans, right? It was just like nothing going on there.
It's
shockingly, yeah.
And there were Shawnee here, there were Cherokee here. We were all here. We've always been here. But the issue is we don't have a seat at the table. Okay, I've actually stood before House members and I said, "Do I look like a figment of your imagination?" And they just stand there and look at me. I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6 foot tall, almost 300 pounds. So, I think that not only are we looking for recognition, and the biggest question you get from that radicalized all right side is, "Oh, you're wanting reparations. I'm not asking for that. I'm asking for you to recognize the Native Americans that are here, indigenous to Kentucky. That's it. And that should not be that hard to do. Yeah. If you go on to Google, you can Google my last name. Just type in Little Flower VanWinkle. It's not even hard. It will tell you when she lived. And it's so sad that
Janet, I think you had something you wanted to add in.
I was on the Native American Heritage Commission. Governor Patton appointed me there in 2000. We've been fighting this battle it's an ongoing battle. We went to Frankfurt and we tried to establish, I think, a definition of what a Native American was. And I remember all of us sitting there and we were so excited. We're finally going to get a seat at the table. They're going to at least recognize. But you know what we found? There were people that were doing this while we were talking and trying to say, we don't want a casino. We're not a reservation. All we want is to be, hey, Janet Quigg is a Native American. Mike VanWinkle is we're part Native American. Our ancestors went on these Trail of Tears. I've been all over I've been all over the United States. Since I've done this powwow, I have slept in a hogan in Monument Valley on Butte Mesa. I've been with Native Americans who could not even speak English. I've danced with the Klingits in Alaska. I have had an education of a lifetime. But still, we have no recognition in the state of Kentucky. And it's so sad.
Well, I'm going to throw it to Doug to ask the next question. But I think this is fascinating, and sorry that you're not getting any recognition out of our Commonwealth, because that does seem like that's not terribly compassionate. I thought that's
Well,
a weird.
we get recognition in a way. I mean, our local mayor. I mean, he writes proclamations. I did a powwow in Prestonsburg for 4 years. The mayor there was, oh, he was just wonderful. Les Stapleton was wonderful. He was so accommodating to us. He wrote a proclamation for Native American Day. We're recognized, but not to the extent that I think we could be.
Gotcha. Doug, you have a question for Janet?
Yeah, I just want to go back to one thing that you led off with, talking about doing everything in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I think a lot of us need to be doing that, because when you're in a circle, you're all inclusive.
Yes.
And we are so torn apart. I work for a CPA firm, and I was in charge of helping to set up the meetings, and they always wanted a square with tables, and they sat on the outside of the tables, and we were having some problems, and we had hired a person to come in to try to help us get through those things. And the first thing he wanted to do was put everybody in chairs in a circle. He didn't want barriers in between them. And I said, "Oh, that's not going to work." And he said, "Well, that's the way it has to be." And that's what we did. It didn't help, but it's a good thing, I think, to be in a circle and include everybody, rather than not include people that you don't agree
Right.
with.
The Cherokees actually have a talking stick. I actually have one. And when you're in a circle, no one is above or below another person. We're all equal sitting here, and we all have our chance to give our opinions. And I think that's so lacking in today's world.
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's been some attention paid to missing Indigenous women and girls disappearing from reservations and not being found or sought by authorities. There's a new Showtime documentary short series, Murder in Bighorn, that points to a much needed spotlight on the issue. I don't visualize that as happening in Kentucky, but what is your understanding of what is going on and what needs to happen?
Well, there's a couple, 2 or 3 different parts to this, okay? Primarily, these young women and girls are being taken from the local reservations out in the western states. The problem is these reservation police forces are usually very, very small, undermanned, underfunded, and they don't have the resources to put forth a huge manhunt, okay? And the MO is too similar, and a lot of Native Americans, including myself, think this may be the act of a serial killer. Unfortunately, because it's reservation related, you have to bring in the federal government for this, and there's a whole lot of red tape that has to happen before even the local or the state level police forces can even engage into the process. So one initiative that I've been aware of for the last few days, and I've been trying to do a little bit more research before this, is that a lot of the reservation, especially the Lakota, the Cherokee, and I think the Dene, are pushing for the initiative of what's called the red dress. It's exactly the same as Amber Alert or Golden Alert. It gives people instant access to information, and hopefully that will help save some of these lives for these young ladies.
And if I might add this too, most of the time, and it's sad, I even hate to say it, but it's sad because most of the time the perpetrator is a white person, and you can't prosecute a white person on a reservation. So therefore you get away with murder, rape, and all kinds of things. And that's been my take on it. So it's an eye-opening situation, and it's very, very critical.
Well, yeah, it definitely seems like I'm glad that the Showtime documentary is out, getting some more attention. That's clearly an indication of some awareness, but hopefully it'll amplify it greatly and will increase the positive pressure to get some answers and find out what's happening there. Well, Mike and Janet, any final thoughts you wanna share with our viewers about the powwow or about the work you guys are doing for kind of recognition of Native American contributions in Kentucky?
Well, the first thing is I want to invite everybody to come out. I want to say hello to people, the young kids in the schools. If you've got questions or you think you may have some Native American heritage, come find any of us that work at the powwow. We'll be more than happy to try to help you find your path. And that's actually happened to me when I ran for state rep in 2020. That's how I found out. And then being 40% Cherokee.
Oh, that's amazing. That's awesome. No one talks about that as one of the benefits of running for office, but you're scrutizing your.
Well, I mean, there's a couple good things. There's a lot of lies said, but but that was one of the positives that I got.
All right. So September 22nd, 23rd, and 24th at Battlefield Park in Richmond. Obviously, it's right there in the name. It's the Richmond Powwow. Thank you both for sharing your experiences with us. Thank you both for sharing your information, and definitely put that on the to-do list for that weekend.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Can I say one more thing?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay, we're stepping out of our comfort zone. We've done the powwow for 29 years, and it's still going, and we'll continue to. And we have a lot of people come from all over the United States to the powwow. We have Apache, Lakota, Osage. I mean, we have a lot of Native Americans. So come out and see them. But we're also doing a benefit concert on July the 22nd at the Pamela Miller Downtown Arts Center. We're teaming up with Palmer Tolley and her husband, Paul Osborne. They're jazz concertists, I think is the word. We're doing this for children and elders on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And we're excited to do this. And we're stepping over a little bit, but we're excited about this as well. And we hope people come out and check this out as well.
All right, that's July, sorry, one more time, July 21st?
July 22nd at 7 o'clock. Tickets are $25. And it's a Metropolitan Contemporary Jazz Orchestra.
Awesome.
So we're going uptown with this.
Will they be in a circle? I hope they're going to be in a circle.
Yes, but, our hearts are always in it. We're always trying to do what we can for Native Americans all over the United States, especially in Kentucky with our little powwow and this concert. But we're benefiting a lot of people. When the vendors come and sell their wares, we're benefiting them. They make their dream catchers, their necklaces or whatever, and they're proud of their heritage, and we're helping them.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We really do appreciate all the information and the organizing you guys do, and we'll check out the powwow. So, all right. So I think we're going to move on now. We've got our kind of call to action. Really an important one. This is actually, if you remember last week's episode, or if you missed last week's episode, how dare you? But if you need more information about how Kentucky is lagging on solar and wind development, we got there's a new story from the Kentucky Lantern, which does such a good job of covering this type of information. But please do, if you need more information about how the PSC is needs to take action to urge more solar and wind development in Kentucky. We had last week the Kentucky Conservation Committee's Lane Boldman, who gave us the lowdown on that. So do check that out, but take action. And this is not just a form letter. They want you to kind of write your own reasons for asking for more solar and wind. If you guys hadn't heard, We are dead last in the United States in terms of solar and wind energy deployment. And that's got to change. And right now, the PSC, I think, is KU is considering closing down a couple of older coal-fired power units, but they want to transition to natural gas without significant build-out of solar, even though solar is actually cheaper per kilowatt hour right now. New solar is cheaper than existing coal, and it's time to move in that direction. So the link there is in the chat. Please do click through and add your voice to the Kentuckians for Energy Democracy. So, all right, Doug, do you want to close us out?
Sure. Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State and organized as a 501c4. We are affiliated with the Individual Project, the Commonwealth Alliance Voter Engagement, commonly referred to as CAVE, and are also proud members of the Forward Kentucky Network. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Make sure to join us next week, where we'll be joined by a great guest. You can count on that. Production of episode 117 was by Annabel Nagel. Thanks, Annabel. You always do a great job. And thank you, Nate, for the theme songs. You can find more information and music at natosongs.com. If you miss our weekly live stream on Facebook, don't worry. You can rewatch shows and see our source links on Facebook. Our audio podcasts are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. Logo and some graphic content provided by Couchfire Media. More information can be found at couchfiremedia.com. Join us next week for an informative meeting. See you next week.